So, are you DTFF?
Once again, here's Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your host, Jake Trowbridge and Dustin Lunt.
Welcome back to DTF, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Happy week 1 of the NFL. We are finally here. Oh, I'm so excited for this. 2 days from now, NFL action starts. We got Thursday game kickoff. We got Friday night in Brazil. We've got all day Sunday red zone. Oh, I am so excited. I'm so here for this. I couldn't be happier. My pants are tight. Jake, how are you doing this evening?
Wow. Well, so much better now after hearing that. I thought I was excited for week 1, but it turns out my excitement pales in comparison to yours. But I am very juiced for it. You and I completed our home league draft just yesterday because we always do it at the very last minute. And that's how I know that football is really, really here, is when that's done. So how did you feel, by the way, post-draft? Did you go home? Did your pants get even tighter after you went home and just reviewed your draft?
You know, if folks, can't see on the live stream here, there's a new piece of memorabilia hanging over my shoulder here. For those of you that have done your fantasy football drafts years ago at Buffalo Wild Wings, they used to have these draft kits with the draft board and goodies to give away. Well, this happens to be the last place loser license plate cover. I decided to hang it as my own form of punishment over my shoulder the entire season long here to remind myself of how bad I did last year. So I don't have a lot of high hopes. I shouldn't say that. I'm kind of ambivalent about my team this year. Usually I'm leaving the draft feeling really good about my team. This year I'm like, it's fine. I'm just tempering my expectations just based off of last year. How are you feeling, Jake, about your squad?
I'm feeling better than ambivalent, which could be a bad thing. Ambivalence could turn out to be the key to success, truly, in fantasy football. Maybe that's the issue, because I've always come out of my drafts being like, fuck yeah. And so maybe that's a bad thing. But I still came out of it going, fuck yeah. So, come talk to me week 6 when my season's on the brink of collapse, and we can have a different kind of discussion.
Absolutely. So let's just sit in our home league draft here for just a minute. So Jake, if there was one player you were super excited to get, like who do you think was your pick of the draft that you're really excited about? And just for people's reference out there listening, we were our 10-team, 1 quarterback PPR league, kind of middle of the road, plain Jane league. Nothing fancy here.
Well, let's not say that. We've got
Well,
weird shit, but it doesn't really affect the draft necessarily, or at least not from like a
mhm.
scoring perspective quite as much, outside of the outrageous penalties for quarterback. But I would say, I came away, there wasn't any one person that I was like, this is it. This is the linchpin to my team. However, there was a very satisfying moment when I believe in round
don't
8, it was, that
don't
I
do it.
got to snipe your guy, your drinking buddy, Deontay Johnson, belongs to my team. And I couldn't be more thrilled about that, frankly. How are you feeling about that?
I hate it. I'm not gonna lie. I hate it. I wish I would have taken him, but that's okay. If you happen to win the league because of Deontay Johnson, I'll just vindicate myself, so that's fine. On the flip side, though, I did get one of your guys on my squad of Kyler Murray. You had taken a quarterback a couple rounds earlier, probably like 3 rounds earlier. You went extremely
So,
early and got Jalen Hurts, which I don't hate. Like, that is a good move, which allowed me to get your guy Kyler. I'm a little surprised you went that route, just how much you have been on Kyler this offseason. So I'm really
you
happy
know,
because I'm in agreement with you about Kyler. I think he's going to have a heck of a season this year. So I was really happy to get him when I did. Um, but other than that, I mean, like I said, my team, I'm okay with it. I'm not feeling super high on it. That's okay. That's okay.
we'll get you there. We'll get you there eventually. We'll get you hyped up for it. Maybe. Maybe not. You can at least be hyped up for Kyler, if nothing else. I will say
That's
this
right.
week, we're into it. By the way, hello into the chat there, Jamie. Hello, Albert. Appreciate the both of you joining us here live. If you want to do that, do that. But in the meantime, we're drinking tonight, Dustin, and this is one that you've supplied. What is this one?
Yes. So this is from it's a collab actually from Youngblood Beer Company here in Madison and Lakefront Brewery in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is Algonquin for the good land. This is called Lighten Up Man. It's the 90s. This is a red lager, dry hopped with Cascade, Chinook, and Centennial. Comes in at 6.2%. It's actually a really good drinking beer. I thought it was going to be way hoppier than it was, just based on the description of all the different hops that were in it. But you don't see a lot of red lagers out there on the market. I really like this beer. I think it tastes really, really good. It's not super heavy. I think it's a great fall transitional beer here.
I was just about to say that. This is the sweet spot. We're not quite ready for Oktoberfest just yet, although I know you're getting close. I do think that this is, a red lager is something very interesting. I've never seen that before, but I think it's wonderful. Not hoppy at all, in fact, but you're right. This is the nice transition out.
Yeah, and Jamie, no, this is not from the 90s. We are not drinking 30-year-old beer. They just like to have clever names here at Working Draft, which is part of the reason why I buy the beers, is just for the names themselves.
True. I don't know where that has to be a quote from something. Lighten Up Man, it's the 90s. I don't know what it is, but I
don't know it either.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, we've got a good episode here. We're just talking storylines this week. Things that we're going to be keeping an eye on as the season progresses here, but really early on in the season, just because we have very small sample sizes with the season only being 17 weeks or 18 weeks with bye weeks. I'm sorry, 17 games. My bad. But you need to be quick to react because things happen really fast. You got to be first to the waiver wire if things happen. Just lots of stuff here. So these are things that we're just kind of looking at, keeping an eye on. Maybe, probably, having some dissenting opinions on some of these storylines of what we think is going to happen. But ultimately, here, just to give you guys an idea of things we're looking at to get this season going as we're monitoring our teams and our squads. Jamie says that quote came from Pulp Fiction.
Thank you, Jamie, for being our
Thank
fact
you.
checker in the chat.
That's right. Thank you for that. All right. No drunk trade tonight, though, Jake. So we should just get right into it, huh? Reddit was being stupid and being down.
More so than
unable to
normal.
access.
Yeah, it was being stupider than normal.
I feel like this was probably something you did, that you lost your access to Reddit and not something that Reddit did on its own.
Disagree.
So I'm just going to leave that there.
Disagree. All right, let's get it.
So, Jake, which of these do you want to start with first? I'll let you pick.
Well, we've got a lot of rookie fever happening in these storylines, which I think is, if we're just talking broad strokes before we get into the specifics, that's what every year really turns out to be for the first few weeks. So which of these guys, if any, can you trust coming out of the gates? I mean, we've drafted a lot of these rookies. The ADPs are justifying it. Some of them late round steals. Some of them you're putting some high capital into. So I do want to start with one of those. And actually, we're going to start with two. The two sort of hot names. Do we expect Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors to battle, maybe even break rookie records in 2024? Dustin, when it comes to these two guys, there is a third person that I think maybe belongs in this, but we're going to talk about him separately. But for these two guys specifically, do you think one of these guys should be in your week one lineup, or maybe even both of these guys in your week one lineup? Or are you playing a wait and see approach if you've drafted them? Marvin Harrison Jr., I know in our league, he went at the tail end of the second round. I think that's about where he's going, maybe even a bit higher in some leagues. So this is a loaded question because normally you don't want to sit a guy that you've drafted that high, but is that something that you would consider here?
Sitting him? Absolutely not. I mean, if you're drafting either of these guys, and I know in our home league, Neighbors went in the third or fourth round. He went pretty early, earlier than I expected, or I would have drafted him personally.
Mhm.
I think though, with both of those guys, if you're drafting them that high, you have to start them. I just why would you be drafting a guy at the end of the second round or into the third or fourth that isn't going to see your weekly starting lineup unless you're one of those crazy people that starts like 4 wide receivers and you only have 3 wide receiver slots to start, then maybe they would be on the outside looking in. But other than that, I mean, you're drafting these rookies. We've seen how the college game has evolved over the years. These wide receivers coming into the league now are way more pro ready than they ever have been. Fuller route trees. They're playing more pro style offenses in college, or maybe vice versa. The NFL has taken some of those college aspects and molded it into the NFL, whichever way you want to look at it. The point being is these guys are coming in ready to go. You're not having to wait for these high end talents like Neighbors and Marvin Harrison to wait 2 or 3 years for that breakout. It's going to happen in the rookie season. Well, I think both of these guys will have great rookie seasons. I am not nearly as high on Neighbors for this year as I am for Marvin Harrison. I think Harrison could be the next guy that breaks all the records that Puka broke last year.
Ooh, I like that because again, it hooks up with my guy Kyler, and I do think that Kyler can supply the juice to get him there. Looking at the flip side with Malik Neighbors, I do not think Daniel Jones can supply the juice to have him breaking any sort of record outside of potentially the most targets by any rookie in their first
Mhm.
season. And I've talked about that a lot. Daniel Jones does not have a lot of options to throw to. Malik Neighbors will be thrown to frequently. The question is, what's he going to be able to make out of those targets? And I'm still very, very, very pessimistic about what his end of year records will look like. But if you're playing in a full PPR format, Neighbors has to still be in your weekly lineup as well. Obviously, Marvin
Mhm.
Harrison Jr., as you said, is in there. Breaking rookie records. I don't even know if Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to break rookie records because Puka just did it. If he has a Puka season, that's why you drafted him as high as he did on the hopes that he can. I
Mhm.
don't know that he does, but I'm
So
comfortable rolling him out.
here's my case for MHJ, Marvin Harrison Jr., for breaking rookie records. Kyler is fully recovered from that injury. The last time that Kyler had a truly dominant wide receiver in that ilk was DeAndre Hopkins way back in 2020 when he was 28 years old. In 16 games, DeAndre Hopkins had 160 targets, 115 receptions, 1,400 yards, 6 touchdowns. I mean, and Kyler hasn't had that type of caliber wide receiver since then. So I think there could be magic this year, and that's part of the reason I know why you're high on Kyler for this year. But also the reason why I'm high on Marvin Harrison for this year and beyond is just he's got a quarterback that can get him the ball. We've seen it happen before with Kyler. He knows how to get the ball to a true number one wide receiver on his squad. I don't see why that would be any different this year.
It's definitely in the range of possibilities. Don't get me wrong. There's a bullish case to be made for him, and you've made it. I do want to caution, though, when you're talking about one of the best receivers in the NFL from the last decade in DeAndre Hopkins, yeah, he's 28 years old, but that was still kind of his prime. I
Mhm.
would suggest that, it's attainable, but I'm not going to bank on that. Either way, I think you're happy if he gets you 80% of what DeAndre Hopkins did that season. At least you're comfortable with it. Maybe not be lucid with it, but you like
Mhm.
that. So I do think it's within the range. We both agree though, Malik Neighbors, not a fucking chance that he gets 1,400 yards this year. Is that fair
No.
to say?
I mean,
All right.
I suppose there's always a chance. It's not like it's a non-zero chance here, but with just how bad we expect that offense to be, even being force fed the ball in that offense, I just don't see it. I just don't think they're going to be explosive enough for him to reach those types of milestones and those types of yardage goals, touchdown. It's just I just don't like I said. There's not a non-zero chance. It could happen. I just don't expect it to happen.
4.5 yards per reception incoming for Malik Neighbors. Who else do you
Uh,
want to talk about here?
um, I think this big not late breaking, but fairly new news with Samaje Perine getting added to the Kansas City Chiefs backfield. You had Clyde Edwards-Helaire going on season-ending IR. Perine, he's been a very serviceable back wherever he's been. We saw it when he was it Cincinnati and then Denver the last couple seasons. Uh, he's always carved out a role where he's been, and Kansas City didn't waste any time picking him up, bringing him into the fold. They obviously wouldn't have brought him on board if they didn't have a need for him or idea of how they were going to work him into their playbook and get him on the field. How much? I don't know. I mean, I still would expect Pacheco to be the main ball carrier in that offense. I think it just reduces Pacheco's receiving upside. I still think he'll get all the bulk of the rushing. Uh, but I just think on those third and longs, maybe that's where we'll see maybe more of a split or maybe Pirine coming in a little bit more than what we'd expect. And we all know with fantasy, especially in PPR leagues, that receptions count way more than rushes do. So it gives me a little bit of a pause and maybe would drop Pacheco down a couple spots in my rankings. But for me personally, it doesn't affect it that much. Uh, how are you feeling about this move, Jake?
Not worried. I don't excuse me. I don't see. I got so excited to talk about Samaje Perine. I don't see Samaje Perine even really being as much of a threat as Jerick McKinnon was in this offense. Now, I think that there was a clear need for Samaje Perine on this offense because Jerick McKinnon's gone. And the timing does seem a little bit conspicuous. Like maybe the Chiefs kind of knew what was happening with CEH and decided, like, well, we got to get depth here too. Sort of maybe, I don't know, maybe the timing is just interesting with that. Regardless, I don't think he's any more than a tertiary running back. Isaiah Pacheco is going to get the bulk of the workload. Samaje Perine hasn't hit 100 rushing attempts since his rookie season, and he's only come close to that, I think, one other time in his career. You're really worried about the pass catching work, but even the last couple of seasons, he averaged 50 targets per year in that season. If you look at what Jerick McKinnon's done, he's closer to like 70. And I think he's better as a pass catcher than even Samaje Perine is at this stage. So I think it's even better to have him there for Pacheco a little bit. So I'm still all in on Pacheco. I think he has obvious top 10 upside, if not substantially more than that. Yeah, Perine doesn't do anything to me, and I'm not drafting Perine or even really picking him up off waivers if he's out there. Is he somebody you'll at least keep your eye on, though, for waivers?
Think so. Like, I think I'll probably go in and just put the little star that I'm interested in keeping an eye on this player, just as a reminder. Like, hey, because if he does pop off and things do change considerably from what we're expecting, because I think we're both
Mhm.
relatively in the same area. We're not expecting this to have a huge impact. Obviously, you're less inclined in that than I am, but I don't feel like we're too far off here on our general feelings. So yeah, I'll keep a just a pin in it just in case, so that it's easily I can find it easily if he does pop off, or just kind of monitor it week to week because this is a high powered offense. If he ends up being more involved than we think, he could be a good flex play, good bye week fill in at running back. And then he's got that potential upside if for some reason Pacheco were to get hurt. he would probably be the next guy in line in that offense to get a significant
You
boost
think?
in workload. So
I don't know that
you
he
don't think
would.
so?
I think no, because I don't think he's that kind of guy. I think he'd
Even on
still be kind of
even on
stuck in
passing
his
work?
role. Yeah, he might see a slight uptick there, but I think that Carson Steele or whoever they have behind him in the depth chart comes and takes over the majority of the workload. And I think that's the case where I would then try to trade Samaje Perine. So if that happens, if Pacheco gets hurt and you have Perine on your roster, I would immediately try to trade him away because I
Oh,
think people would expect him to get,
mhm.
150 rushing attempts and whatever, and I just don't see that for him.
Yeah, I wouldn't see him necessarily the rushing back, but definitely I think his pass work would significantly increase in that situation.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't like him either way. I'm sorry. And not as a human being. I'm sure he's a great human being. Samaje, if you're
Obviously,
watching, which we know you
obviously.
are, you're a wonderful person. But for fantasy purposes, I'm going to stay away. All right.
Uh,
Let's
who do you wanna
let's
talk
get
about
into
next,
the
Jake?
other. I want to get to the other guy out of that previous trio that we talked about that was kind of left on an island. All right. I just want to make it clear I didn't do that. I wasn't the guy who put him on that island of misfit toys. But Rome Odunze.
Hey, I felt like this needed its own he needed his own time to be talked about here because I do
Oh,
think this
okay.
is a valuable point because as it stands right now, he's number 3 on this depth chart, behind DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. Regardless of what you think, Keenan Allen's age, whatever, like
Mhm.
he is the incumbent. He is the guy that will be starting ahead of Odunze on the depth chart. My question is, do you believe that he will easily overtake Keenan Allen? And at what point would you be comfortable, say, or at what point in the season do you think he's going to become a weekly starter for your fantasy lineups, if at all this season?
Weekly starter is tough. That's a tough one to say. I think there's going to be plenty of matchups where he'll have utility, at least as a flex guy. And arguably, you could even trot him out there in your flex week one. Because from my perspective with Keenan Allen, and you know how much I love Keenan Allen, so I shouldn't have to apologize too
I
much about this.
no.
But even with my love for Keenan Allen, I can recognize not just that he is older, but what his status was in the previous offense, which is way different than what it's going to be with the Bears. He was the only name in town for the last 2 to 3 years for the Chargers, essentially. They had some other guys floating around him, but nobody that was really competition for Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen now would make a lot more sense, I think, for the Bears to rely on him as the guy who's out there in 3 wide receiver sets. I think DJ Moore and Rome Odunze are going to be the guys that are out there in 2 receiver sets. So I think that Rome Odunze then naturally has a spot in your lineup a lot of weeks. You might not want to play him, over a guy like DK Metcalf or something, for example. And I understand that. But I think by week 4, we're talking about Rumo Dunze in a much different light than we even are right now. Because I just think we're nervous, rightfully so, because they have so many pass catchers on that offense. And I get it, but I'm
Mhm.
more worried for Keenan Allen than I am for Odunze. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you on this one. I think definitely by the middle of the season, Odunze will certainly assert himself and be the more explosive counterpart to DJ Moore as opposed to Keenan Allen. As you said, Keenan Allen getting up there in age, and we both love Keenan Allen on this pod. We're not saying anything bad about Keenan, but he is at the point of his career where, yeah, he is not going to be the number one option on an offense, especially one like this, where they just paid DJ Moore. They just spent a top 10 pick on a Dunze. Yeah, I think by middle of the season, personally, Keenan Allen will be relegated to that third wide receiver role. Could be sooner, but I mean, Adunze, just based on fantasy analysts that do the scouting that I trust, he was in a tier like just by himself, like just below Neighbors and Marvin Harrison. So um, I don't know. I guess I don't know. This is a tough one for me. Because I love the talent. I just don't know with this Bears offense, and just seeing how they made Keenan Allen a priority in free agency that they're just not going to utilize them. So I don't know. Maybe I'm hedging my bets here, but I would say that at least
Well,
by
let me
middle of the
say this.
season, I would expect Odunze to take over.
I don't think you're going to get massive ceiling out of Odunze one way or the other this year. I think that his ceiling is very well capped because of not just the target competition, but because he's playing with a rookie quarterback. Even if he was alone here without all of the other target competition, it'd still be stiff for him to get up into the upper echelon, I think. So all those factors combined, I'm never going to bank on him for one of those, hey, he's got 40-point potential this week. You're hoping that he just gets to be some level of consistent in the offense. So that's the difference. So to your point about breaking him out from the other two guys, at least I see a world. I see a path where there is like really big spike weeks. I don't know that I see that here for Odunze.
Hmm. Fair enough. I think we can agree on that one. All right, let's move on here. I want to talk a little Kirk Cousins. I think this has
Really?
multiple fantasy implications. I do. I like Captain Kirk. Very underrated. He's coming off this Achilles injury. Now, everything that we've heard and seen so far with the preseason looks like he's back full strength. So, first, Jake, do you believe that he is back full strength? Yes or no?
Sure. Full
Okay.
strength for what's needed from him. Yeah.
I mean, rushing and he's never been that guy. He's never been the guy to run and rush the ball. He's always been a pocket passer. So that was never part of his game. Definitely not part of his game. So I agree. I think he'll come back. I I mean, from what the little bit we saw in preseason, he looked healthy, he looked good, so I'll have to believe it. Um, so that being said, does he move up in your ranks at all here to be like an upper end QB2, or is he in that kind of mid to lower range QB2, just based on his age and recovering from this injury? And then how does this not higher if all things go the right way? Yeah, as long as Kirk Cousins returns to form and we see what we saw, over his career, especially these last few years with the Vikings. We saw him being able to support TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, also, had decent running backs there during his time. So he's able to support this offense. So I think that Kirk will easily be able to support these guys and at a high end. Jake, welcome back. I was just
Thanks.
espousing my love for Kirk Cousins and how I feel like he's going to be able to support these fantasy relevant players. And Drake London, I said Drake London could be top 12 wide receiver pretty easily. And Kyle Pitts, I said could be a top 3 tight end this year. Do you agree with those assessments or no?
I'm so happy to hear that come out of your mouth as somebody who's been really high on Drake London all this offseason. Yes, I firmly agree with you on that. I think Kyle Pitts, we've talked about, yes, could absolutely hit that upper tier of tight ends fairly easily. Both of these guys have only ever needed competency at quarterback, nothing special.
Hmm.
They don't need Pat Mahomes to deliver these really high-end fantasy weeks. They just needed somebody who could place the ball accurately, and they have that in Kirk Cousins. And that's why I like Kirk Cousins more for the other fantasy pieces than I like for himself. He's fine for fantasy. I don't know that we'll even get to see him back to what he was in Minnesota for fantasy. Just fine. Like, I'd still be okay if you're debating, again, if you haven't drafted yet somehow, like debating between Jared Goff and Tua and Kirk Cousins, just give me Kirk because he's much later. But with that said, I am super excited for the two of those guys.
Right on, Jake. Who's next? Or which storyline do you want to talk about next here on our list?
You mentioned Kyle Pitts, so I do want to talk about another sort of super athletic tight end who disappointed last year, just like Kyle Pitts did. That's Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid came out last year super hyped up, and he just dudded. He just really dudded. Dawson Knox had to sustain an injury, be off the field for a few weeks before you could even toss Kincaid into your lineup at all. And by then, you probably didn't trust him enough to do it. So, is a breakout officially on the way for Dalton Kincaid? I think if you're just doing math, and I don't do that very often, I try to avoid it, in fact. But for this guy, I look at who left and who joined and what the X factor is in that equation, and that's Dalton Kincaid. Stephon Diggs, gone. Gabe Davis, gone. You mentioned in the show sheet that it was a worse overall wide receiving crew. I don't know that I believe it's worse necessarily, because you damn well better respect Curtis Samuel and what Khalil Shakir did to come
I
on
didn't
at the end
say
of the
worse.
last year.
I didn't say
think you
worse.
did.
I said relatively weak. Relatively weak compared to last
Okay.
year.
That's the same thing. That's just fancier words to get you there.
Don't you be putting words into my mouth and making me look bad here, besmirching this Buffalo wide receiver room.
I think a thesaurus put those words into your mouth. But either way, with Dalton Kincaid, I think what he should absorb is A, another year in this offense, and B, no dominant number one receiver, perhaps. And maybe that's what you're alluding to. For Stephon Diggs, at least at the beginning of last year, the dominant guy, then everybody else kind of got their target shares dispersed off of him. Now, with that gap in the offense, it should just make it a little bit at least more parceled out, those targets. And so Dalton Kincaid should see that. So I'm willing to say for Dalton Kincaid that a breakout season for him would be, really top 10 compared to what we got last year. And I think that's absolutely on the table. Of course, you draft him with the hopes that he can be top 5. I waver about that. Do you think he can hit top 5 numbers with Josh Allen doing what he does in the red zone?
I think he can. Am I confident about it? Absolutely not. It's going to be interesting to see how this Buffalo offense takes shape this year. We saw last year after the coordinator change, the rush game got way more involved with the running backs. That's where we saw James Cook kind of take a big step forward, which drove up his ADP this offseason. Uh, I don't know. I have legitimate questions about it. I was off of Kincaid at ADP this draft season. I just wasn't comfortable falling into that trap this year because I do think it's a trap at his ADP. Could he reach that? Sure. Josh Allen has to throw the ball to someone. Stephon Diggs is not there, as you said. Gabe Davis not there. Yes, they brought in some other pieces, but I mean, they did draft Kincaid very highly just a year ago, 2 years ago now, since last year was his rookie year. But so hopefully they have plans to get him on. Maybe this will be a situation where he's like that spread tight end, and Dawson Knox is the inline guy, and Kincaid has played more as a wide receiver than a true tight end in this offense now. But I have my reservations about him actually breaking out this year. Can it happen? Absolutely. I'm just not very high on him personally.
Yeah, I think his ceiling this year is Mike Gesicki. That in his better years, Mike Gesicki, I should say, not current recent version of him. I think that's what you're hoping for, honestly, or not what you're hoping for, but I think what your best bet is with Kincaid this year. It's like, all right, he can flirt around tight end 5 through tight end 10, and that'll get you there. But I think people who are talking about top 3, I just don't see it. Unlike with Kyle Pitts.
I mean, if you're saying tight end 5, is his range of, probably his best range of outcome. That's where you're having to draft him at, basically, is tight end 5. So you're drafting him at his ceiling. which is not something I want to do when I'm drafting any player, is just taking them at their ceiling. So, and
Except for your
I
first
know with
round
these first
players,
round guys, like, yeah, that's the exception. Like, come on. But when we're starting to get into this, like, fifth, sixth, seventh round, I want to be drafting players that potentially will give me a higher ceiling than what I think Kincaid will. So,
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, enough about tight ends potentially altogether. What do you want to move into here?
well, I only see a couple more on here, Jake, and I like this one that you actually put on the sheet here. And this is talking about the Denver offense, and what can we expect? Is there going to be actually any fantasy relevant pieces coming out of Denver? I think so. I think there will be. I think Javonte Williams. I think he's going to be a solid RB2 this season, especially with P Ryan leaving the team. That freed up a big chunk of a question mark, I guess, that was out there as far as how this backfield was going to shake out. And I know there's still plenty of competition and other guys that have definitely showed off there with McLaughlin and
Estime.
Estime. Yes, thank you. But I do think he is the entrenched starter. I think he was still recovering from injury last year, so I do think that he takes a step forward. I think he will be an RB2. I don't expect him. I definitely don't have hopes of what we expected with him coming out, being this high, low end RB1 type back. Especially in this offense, but I do think there's potential there, and I do think Cortland Sutton is going to be the number one receiving option on this squad. I think he could be someone that you could consistently put in on bye weeks or as a flex play, matchup dependent for him, and probably give you some decent value. So those are two pieces that I think this Denver offense can provide for fantasy. What do you say, Jake? Do you agree, or is there anyone else you're looking at possibly?
I think it's all disgusting. Let me be clear. I think it's all pretty gross and grody, and I don't love any part of it. The one guy that I left my draft with from this team for our home league, which was in the last round, was Greg Dulcich, because why not? Because when Greg Dulcich has been healthy, hey, he's been really good. He's been a really good tight end.
Hmm.
And so, in terms of sleeper, I've talked about him a lot. He is kind of my go-to tight end sleeper. But outside of that, yeah, Cortland Sutton, I guess, fine. Felt like he kind of reached his peak last year a little bit with Russell Wilson, and that was only because they had some weird, almost like twinsy kind of magic going on. And I don't think he replicates that with Bo Nix. And then there's who is going to be wide receiver two? Hypothetically, it should be Marvin Mims, but watch it be Josh
Hmm.
Reynolds just because of Sean Payton,
Yeah.
you know. And you're not going to want to start Josh Reynolds ever. So you're never going to pick him up off waivers, probably. Even if he goes off 1 week for like 75 yards and a touchdown, you're going to be like, Josh, maybe next week. And then next week, you won't do it either. So I really do think your options are either the backfield or the tight end. I don't know that I'm super excited for Javante because it's all scoring opportunities. How many scoring opportunities is he going to see? Does he get maybe 5 touchdowns?
Hmm.
I'd almost put that as his max. And Jaleel McLaughlin, yeah, I think he's a better pass catcher than P. Ryan, so he'll probably get some work. But I don't know if it's going to be enough to want to start him. It's a bunch of these guys that you're going to look at on your team, go, fuck. I guess if I'm desperate for a flex play, I'll pop you in. I think that's the entire roster,
Hmm.
basically. So I'm been avoiding it. I'll continue to avoid it unless, if Bo Nix comes out and he starts firing away and he looks really, really solid. All right, I'll reassess. I'm not that stubborn. But for right now, I'm staying away.
Hmm. Yeah, Jamie says in the chat here, Dulcich can be the useful in that Joker role, like Peyton used Jimmy Graham. I
Yeah.
think if that were the case, that would be amazing. Because, like you said, Jake, Dulcich has flashed when he's been healthy, and maybe Peyton can get him into that role and really utilize him to his fullest. Uh, Another question from Jamie: what do you guys think Deshaun Watson does in his first game back versus a tough Dallas defense?
Well, all right. We're going to have to talk about him, huh? I was already avoiding because I don't trust him. I just don't. I don't trust Deshaun Watson because Deshaun Watson's had 4 games since he's been a Cleveland Brown where you're like, I like that for my fantasy team. Yeah, the injuries, I understand the injuries have gotten in the way. In week 1, am I trusting that guy against that defense? There's just no way. There's just no way that I can do it. In DFS, in daily, if you want to be completely opposite, go for it. Right? If you want to be just completely against the grain, then that's a move that you can make. In redraft, he is on my bench until I am desperate to start him. But would you? I guess how desperate would you have to be to start him in week 1?
Extremely desperate. I mean, Watson was someone I was pretty well avoiding in redraft this year. I don't have faith in him. It's been a number of years now since we've seen him perform at the level he did in Houston. I just don't know. I just don't know that he's got it, and I don't know what happened between now and then. If it was all this kind of legal, personal stuff that was going on, that was the extracurricular stuff that kind of derailed it, or maybe it was just going to Cleveland that did it. I don't know, but I don't trust him, and he was pretty well a void for me this year in drafts, especially at his ADP because he was still going fairly high. But I just no, I don't trust, especially against Dallas. I don't trust him at all, not at all. I would
Yeah,
avoid it at all costs.
Jamie, I know you're a Browns fan, so I'll try to not be such a dick about this. But we've seen the Browns just zap quarterbacks before. Unless your name is Joe Flacco, it's really hard to go into Cleveland and sustain any level of success. I mean, just ask Baker Mayfield about, you've seen the memes. Comes in riding high with his bandanas and his sweet vibes. And then by season 2, he looks like John Candy in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's a tough city. But yeah, I wouldn't be doing that. There is one other thing that I wanted to get to here, talking about quarterbacks on rough offenses or rough situations altogether. It's Bryce Young. Can a new offense, a new offensive style fix Bryce Young from last year, who was obviously a massive disappointment if you drafted him over CJ Stroud in your dynasty leagues? I'm sorry. Support group meets every Wednesday. There's donuts. But Bryce Young now has, along with your guy Deontay Johnson, who can separate like a beast in that offense, he also has Dave Canales, who's been something of a miracle worker for quarterbacks recently. Started with Geno, and then it's the previously mentioned Baker. He's kind of helped them right their ships. Do you think that Bryce is next on the list? Or another way to say it, what do you think his ceiling is this year?
His ceiling, I think, excuse me, I think his ceiling could be maybe a mid-range QB2 at best. And that's really if all things click and it's, works out perfectly. You know, Carolina, they brought in Deontay Johnson. They still have Adam Thielen. They've got a couple of other young wide receivers, which
Mingo,
I'm totally. What's that?
Jonathan Mingo, talk about him.
Yep, yep.
Xavier Leggett.
And then there's that guy too. They also brought in a couple guards in the offseason via free agency to try to help shore up that offensive line, which was really bad last year. They brought in Jonathan Brooks, obviously starting on the pup to start the season, but should be back after 4 weeks and hopefully ready to go. By that point, he'll be like 10 months, 11 months removed from his ACL tear. So should be hopefully back to full strength. Maybe he's going to be one of these running backs that comes back after injury, fully healthy, without any sort of lack of production. So I think Carolina has done some work to give him the weapons and support he needs. Obviously, the offensive coordinator situation helps as well. So, yeah, I think there's hope for Bryce Young. Like I said, if all things work out, like mid-range QB2 at best, I just don't see anything
Mm-hmm.
higher than that. Realistically, he's probably going to be a low-end QB2 for the season, but there's a chance he could outperform that.
Yeah, I agree. I do think, coincidentally, what you're probably going to get out of him as his maximum is like Baker Mayfield from last year.
Mhm.
And even last year, nobody was that excited to start Baker Mayfield. He went off some weeks and it was great, but it wasn't like, oh, I need a QB this week. I'm definitely believing in Baker. It was more of like, all right, who has a decent matchup this week? All right, Baker's playing such and such defense. Let me go with that. I think that's going to be what Bryce Young ends up being this year for most people. It's just a solid streaming option in the exact right situation. With that said, from
Mhm.
dynasty perspective, I would say if you haven't already tried to trade for Bryce Young, I would at least give it a go. So I think his price tag is still pretty low, but I think his upside as a consistent starter, especially in super flex leagues, is pretty untapped, and I'm willing to go for that.
All right. Question here from Gator in the chat joining us. Trying to trade Devonta Smith. What's the correct value?
I like Devontae Smith. You and I have talked about Devontae Smith. I think Kellen Moore is going to help him this year, but if you're trying to trade him away, I think in Dynasty you have to be looking still at, sorry, I think you better be getting a first round pick for Devontae Smith. He's
Hmm.
still incredibly young, still in a great offense. He still has those massive spike weeks. It's trading for Tyler Lockett at 25 years old. And I think Tyler Lockett at 25 years old deserved a first round pick. You probably weren't able to get it. But that's the rub with Devontae Smith. People are probably going to send you seconds or send you, a 4-for-1 kind of trade for Devontae Smith. So I would say to be cautious about those. But what's your value on him?
Yeah, I agree with you, Jake. I think a first is what you should be able to get for him. Uh, I just with AJ Brown ahead of him, I just don't know if
Mhm.
that's going to be the reality. Because people see a depressed value because he is the number 2 on a team. Even though he is really young, he is dynamic. Uh, he's produced every year he's been in the league, but I think there's that perception, and I know I hold that perception too. You just don't know what weeks he's going to pop off, especially with AJ Brown there ahead of him. But as you said, Jake, with Kellen Moore there now, maybe things change a little bit, or they're a little bit more pass heavy than they were last year, spread the ball around a little bit more. So I do think a first is fair value. I just don't know if that's what you're going to get for him, but that's personally what I would try to hold out for.
Yeah, and the problem is like even after his big boom week happens, which is going to happen in the first 4 weeks at least, even coming off of that, you're not going to be able to trade him for a higher value because everybody is expecting those random pop-offs. So if there's a player value, maybe the pivot would be going after just a completely different position and saying, I'm going to try to get my really respectable tight end. Maybe if you believe in Dalton Kincaid, and people are questioning him, and it's not a tight end premium, you could go after Dalton Kincaid with Devontae Smith. If it's tight end premium, I don't think he'd come even close to that. But in a regular league, that could be an option at least. Pivot away to a different position.
I was thinking tight end, same thing, Jake. We're locked in right now. Locked in.
Got it. God love us. Whew. Is there any
Hmm.
other storylines that you're curious about here?
No, I'm just excited for the season to start. I can't wait.
Me too.
Actually, if we want to bring a little bit of homerism into the show here. We could
Mhm.
talk about this wide receiver core for the Packers, or just not just the wide receivers, but the tight ends. Yeah, who do you think is really going to be the guy that steps forward in this offense to be Jordan Love's like go-to player, and ultimately the number one receiving option on this squad? Do you have a hard and fast stake in the sand on this one, Jake?
The short answer is no. The longer answer is complicated. It's complicated because I don't know that his go-to option is even his best fantasy option. Ironically, like I think Christian Watson is the best fantasy option because, again, if he's healthy and the hamstrings stay intact, he's been the big play guy, and he's been not necessarily fully consistent, but he has been somewhat of the guy. And so he might not become a go-to for Jordan Love because I think he just spreads it around still. But in terms of who I want off of that offense, it's going to be, him and Josh Jacobs and probably Dontavian Wicks super late because I'm very curious to see if he has a, mid-season breakout here. But who's your preference? What's your druthers in that offense?
Yeah, I'm with Christian Watson. I think this is the year he finally stays healthy. He actually did some work this offseason to address those concerns because it's hampered his career to start with. So the fact that he took this very seriously, did the work to try to correct these issues, hopefully it actually sticks. And if it does, I think, yeah, Christian Watson is going to be the guy that you're going to want on this offense. And I think probably the most outside of Love and Jacobs, the most fantasy relevant receiving option on this team.
I agree. I'm excited that there's a Friday night game, by the way, this week. We've got
I
the
know.
Brazil
Ugh.
game, Eagles versus Packers. That's going to be something. We've got Thursday football. We've got
Mhm.
Friday football. We've obviously got Sunday and Monday football. So this is a pretty killer kickoff week.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, all right. JSN or Kirk for week 1?
Because it's week 1, and I'm guessing that's got to be Christian Kirk, obviously, not Kirk Cousins.
Yes.
Between JSN and Christian Kirk, because these guys are probably at best your second wide receiver, possibly even your third or flex. My answer is a little bit different than normal. I want to shoot still for upside in week 1, and I do think Jackson Smith and Jigba has tons of upside in this offense. He's a little bit of an unknown, admittedly. I'm okay with that because, again, your number one receiver shouldn't be either of these guys. I'm going to go with JSN firmly and assume that we see a much more aired out offense from the Seahawks than we typically do. Christian Kirk, you could probably get yourself 70 yards, hopefully a touchdown. I think that's kind of his ceiling in week 1. I think JSN has an even higher ceiling, but what do you think?
Yeah, I know you're lower on Christian Kirk than I am, but I'm still going to go with JSN. Tyler Lockett's been dealing with that injury, which JSN should be the number 2 on this squad. And he's got what should be a pretty favorable matchup against the Broncos this year, or this week. So give me JSN this week with the perceived better matchup.
I like it. I like it. And I'm still not positive of how the split's going to work between Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk going out there. So I still have my question marks surrounding that whole thing this year. But all right, we're
Mhm.
in agreement on that. Do we have any other questions in the chat, by the by, before we scoot?
Yeah. Quinn joining us. Just dropped one here. JT or AJ Brown, pick 10, 12 team PPR draft.
My answer is my answer is going to be one of my love affairs for this year, which is AJ Brown. I'm projecting a career year for him. Again, I think both him and Devontae Smith do very well under Kellen Moore, but especially AJ Brown. Jonathan Taylor, look, you're at pick 10. He could come back around to you in the second round. There is
Ding
a
ding.
strong chance, right? AJ Brown ain't coming
Yep.
back.
Yep. I was going to say the exact same thing. Give me AJ Brown at pick 10. Chances are you'll be able to get JT at the swing there, at the short turn there for you. So take that elite wide receiver and hope that JT comes back. If not, chances are there's going to be another great running back there in that range for you to select.
Yep. Go after Saquon, go after Derrick Henry, whatever. You can make that work in round 2. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think you're going to be bummed otherwise.
Yep. All right. Well, Jake, are you feeling good about this? Are you ready for week 1?
Feeling great. So excited. I don't know what to do with my hands. I'm so excited.
Yes. And this becomes our weekly reminder, folks. Get those lineups in. Check the waiver wire for any last minute additions. We got Thursday night games. Make sure you take Thursday and Friday. Take those guys out of your flex spots, put them in your starter spots to give you more flexibility come Sunday. Uh, but yes, get those lineups in. Don't forget to set the lineups. I know it's a short week with the holiday here and games starting on Thursday. It's a quick turnaround, but got to be ready for it. So make sure you get your lineup set and do what you got to do to get yourself ready here for week one. And good luck to everyone out there. And hopefully all of your matchups are great successes. And all the other people you're going against, big
Suck a butt.
losses.
Suck a butt,
That's
losers.
right. Any final thoughts before we head out here, Jake?
I think it cut out after I said suck a butt, losers. I think that's how we're going to have to end the show. I just don't know that there's a way to return from that, frankly, nor do I want to.
All right. All right. So we will leave it there, folks. And we will see you next week.
Cheers, Epic.